About the network issue. Nobody even knows what happened, but the last phase just ended abruptly. So we'll just continue here, please. I sincerely apologize. Please, our speakers. I'm sorry, you guys should just continue from where we sit.
Well, it's fine, it's fine. That's understand the dynamics of Twitter space. All right. So I think we can just kick off from should I continue from where I
Yeah, please
stopped?
continue. Yeah.
All right.
Nancy,
So I
please
think we
make
talk
Rekia a speaker as well. Sorry.
all
All
right, no
right.
wahala. All right, I think we're talking about coercion, right? I think I was talking about how if there's any form of trickery, like one of the major things in Nigerian law as regards sexual assault is if someone pretends to be a husband or a wife in order to sleep with either the other partner, that's a very huge factor in Nigerian law against sexual assault. So any form of trickery, maybe you are pretending to be somebody else, you are pretending to be something else, if there is no clear cut communication, it is coercion. And like I said earlier, it can be in the smallest way or in the largest way. Smallest simple way, like okay, not necessarily simple, maybe straightforward, like a lecturer has threatened to fail me in a course if I don't sleep with him, or if I don't engage in sexual activity with he or she, yeah. So there's that is coercion, because the person, that student at that point feels like they have no choice. If they don't do this, there are consequences. That is coercion. That is not consent. And then there's the one, then if you now go to maybe a smaller community, a smaller faction of maybe I'm trying to my husband, I'm asking my husband for sex in quotes, but he's telling me he's tired, and the husband he knows that if he doesn't agree to sex, there'll be a whole fight the next day. Or the wife knows that if she doesn't agree to sex, there'll be a whole fight the next day. That's not consent, it's coercion, because the person is obviously not enthusiastic about what is about to happen. So it is obvious that there is no free will, there's not a voluntary decision, because the person feels like there are going to be consequences. So that is not consent in any way. That is coercion. So I think we've been able to talk about like the various ways in which consent can be will I say disrupted to coercion. And it's just basically forcing in a non-physical way, forcing any form of sexual relations. That's what it is. Any form of force to engage in sexual relations that is non-physical, right, is coercion, and then it is not consent. You have not received and you have not given consent to the person involved. So now one thing that we need to understand the power dynamics is that power dynamics works in a way that you may not even necessarily need to say, oh, it's because I'm your boss, or it's because I'm your superior, that's why you feel obliged to engage in this sexual activity with me. As long as there is a power difference, maybe the man or the woman is in a higher, will I say higher position than the other person, right? There is definitely going to be a bias. He has to be, there's no how. If you are asking for something and the person feels like they are going to be punished for it, definitely it is not consent, it is coercion. And one concept that can be quickly like talked about here is grooming. It's something that they use a lot on Twitter. It's like when older men or older women, they maybe, will I say in simple terms, right? There's a relationship that lasts, or they start dating someone maybe at a very, very young age. They not necessarily dating, maybe they are in the corner, and I'm saying this with air quotes, in the corner, in this person's corner, you know, advising the person, but their actual intention is to date this person or engage in sexual activity, however, whatever form of relationship they want to have with this person, right? And this person is not old enough, right, to make a choice. So the person is just going with it because the person is young. You build a relationship, trust, emotional connection with a younger person so that you can exploit them, manipulate them. So you use their use their ignorance in that moment of their life, right, to take advantage of them, use it to be their only form of trust. And we see it if we bring it to a Nigerian situation now. You see a 15-year-old girl who she has not entered the university, she just left secondary school, and then you feel like, okay, you're an older man, and then you feel like, don't worry, that this girl is young, we can mold her. That's something a lot of people, a very misogynistic term. I want to mold the young girl, which is why a number of people will say that men go for women that are really, really way younger, so that they can, in quotes, mold them when they are not clay, for God's sake. But yeah, you will say that you want to mold the girl. You basically taking advantage of a young mind at that point, and then you gain trust, and then she's able to rely on you totally, and then you manipulate. This manifests a lot, because in the future, even if you don't have sexual relations with that person at that time, in the future, the person does not understand the concept of equality in that relationship, because you've already taken a higher standpoint. So this person will feel like, oh, yes, I have no choice. This person has been with me from the beginning. This person paid my school fees. This person, I've been the one paying your school fees. I paid your school fees since you were in 100 level. I've been the one sending your allowance. Nigerian girls are so ungrateful. These young girls of these days, person is not consenting to whatever is going to happen between both of you. It is question, because you literally groomed this young child. So it is necessary that people understand that once you are using a person's ignorance is not only when the child person is young. Maybe person is new in a sector, in tech. Somebody is new in tech, somebody is new in medicine, whatever sector you are in, and then you're using that person's ignorance at that point, in age or in experience, to manipulate that person. There's no consent, this question, and then you are actually engaging in sexual assault. So yes, I don't know if that answers the question on coercion, grooming, and basically the concept around it.
Yeah, thank you very much. You've done a lot on it. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So talking about thank you very much again, Ogolua, for the depiction that you've given on coercion and power dynamics and grooming, and how it can relate to sexual consent and, by extension, sexual assault, because this is something that happens in the background a lot, where people feel like they owe someone sex because they have had such an influence in their lives. And so it's like, they're asking me for this thing. Oh, can I say no? And you think that you are doing it of your own volition, but you're not realizing that at the background, what's going on is that you feel some kind of debt to them. But sex isn't something that you give as a repayment for anything. It should be enthusiastic. It should be what you want. Which brings me to the point of, you need to be assertive when it comes to sexual consent. A lot of people don't want to feel like they're the bad person. So when someone makes an advance towards them, they don't really want it, but they just say yes to not make the person feel bad, or to just, okay, let's just go ahead with it. Now, this isn't sexual assault because you have voluntarily, consciously, deliberately given consent. But it means that you are not confident in your own assertion of your sexuality. And it's important when it comes to sexual consent, in terms of asking and receiving. If you're asking, it's important that you are confident about it. If you want to have sexual relations with someone, ask confidently and leave it at that. But you should also be open to the idea that they will say no. They can't say no. It is their right to say no. And then as the other person, you should also be confident in the fact that you are allowed to say no. It is your prerogative to say no. It's your body. Body autonomy is the foundation of sexual consent. The idea that no matter what, no one has any entitlement to your body whatsoever, even if they are married to you. And then when it comes to coercion, another emphasis I would want to make is not just in physical sexual relations, but when it also comes to things like sending nudes. Now, sending nudes is such a controversial subject that we will not go into, but it also has to do with sexual consent. Sending pictures to a person, first of all, without getting the person's consent, is sexual assault. But then when someone is requesting sexual content from you, over the phone, asking you for pictures, whatever, you do not need to ever feel compelled to do it. If you feel compelled, then you're not giving that consent voluntarily. And so consent also applies to things on the media, sending and receiving sexually graphic images. And then when it comes to the idea that you have to do it in such a way that it's not because it's the other person that's asking, as opposed to this is what you want to do as a person who has the right to their body and the content that they create with their body. In addition to that, something that we've unfortunately not highlighted, but is super important, and I'm hoping that everybody already knows, is that all of this sexual content and consent talk that we've been doing is only applicable to adults. Adults by the Nigerian Constitution are people who are above the age of 18. That being said, children cannot give any form of sexual consent. They cannot give consent. They cannot seek consent. They cannot send you pictures. Sending pictures is termed child pornography, and that is a crime. So when we've been talking a lot about all of this, please, I want to believe you already know this, but just for emphasis sake, none of this applies to anyone who is under the age of 18. All right, so moving on, we will be going to another aspect of sexual consent that is also contentious, that makes sexual consent complicated because it's an attitude thing when it comes to people's concept of sexual consent, and that has to do with the vulnerability when it comes to sexual consent, and then something that is controversial again, toxic masculinity. Now, why toxic masculinity, you will ask? The truth is, for our climb, sexual relations usually come from the place of man, woman, right? So it's the man that is often supposed to be seeking consent, because it's not very encouraged in our climb for women to seek consent because they're not the ones that are approaching the man. I do not agree with this. I believe assertion when it comes to seeking consent goes both ways. As a woman, you should feel confident enough in your sexuality to ask for consent to have sexual relations with a person if that is what you want to do. But now, why the emphasis on toxic masculinity is because in our climb, still there aren't enough women who are seeking consent, and it's mostly the men. So there is an emphasis on toxic masculinity and how it affects sexual consent because of the way it is perceived by men. So to speak a bit about that, Rekia, please. Rekia, can you hear me? Okay, it seems she's having network issue. Please just give her one moment. All right, while she's trying to connect back, I would like to give us a couple of scenarios when it comes to sexual consent to give us an idea of what sexual consent can look like in action. If any of you have seen Bridgerton, the Netflix show, there's a sexual scene that involves the two main characters, the Duke and Daphne. Now, these two people are married and they are having consensual sex. Now, the Duke doesn't want to have children, but his wife is not aware of this fact. And so what happens is that each time they have sex, he ejaculates outside of her. For the longest time, she didn't understand what was happening, because if you know how women who were raised in the primitive ages, the Elizabethan times, they don't talk to women about sex and all of that. So she didn't know what was happening. She eventually found out that he was ejaculating outside of her because he didn't want to have children. Now, understand again, they are both having consensual sex. They are happily having sex. The problem is that he's ejaculating outside. Now, when she finds out that this is the reason why he's doing this, but she wants children, she gets him slightly drunk so that he's not strong enough. but he consents to the sex, right? He's slightly drunk, but he consents to the sex. He's happy to have sex with her. But then what happens is, because he's slightly drunk and she's on top of him, she forces him to ejaculate inside of her. Now, this is sexual assault, because what the Duke has consented to is having sex up until the point of ejaculating outside. Now, continuing the sexual acts so that he ejaculates inside of her has crossed the boundaries of his sexual consent, irrespective of the fact that he wants to have sex with her, and irrespective of the fact that she wants children. Wanting children, in quotes, can be seen as an ethical thing in the context of marriage, right? But he doesn't want to have children for reasons best known to him in the movie. And then she has crossed the confines of his consent by doing that, regardless of the fact that they had consensual sex and they are married. So that is something that I wanted to paint to us when it comes to coercion and force, when it comes to sexual consent, because the lines that constitute sexual assault can sometimes be considered gray by certain people when it comes to sexual consent. But it's understanding that you have crossed the confines of a person's sexual consent that makes you understand that you are possibly sexually assaulting them. I don't know, Rick here, are you available to continue or do we go on? All right, whenever she comes back on, we'll be able to talk more on toxic masculinity and vulnerability in relation to sexual consent. Okay, Rick, I think you're back on. Well, we'll be moving on to another important section of this consent pod. Before this session, we sent out a questionnaire to NiMSA to gather questions that they have on sexual consent so that we can talk about them and bring more context to our conversation. So we'll quickly be going through them, the number of them, and we'll be running through as many as possible. And maybe I will let someone speak through the course of this. If anybody wants to speak, you can send a request through when we're going through the questions, and we may just give you space to do that. So, Ogolua, are we set?
Yes, we are.
All right. Okay, so the first question that we have is, how do you politely yet firmly tell someone wanting to get into a romantic relationship with you that you don't want to have sex until marriage without sounding desperate? How can you politely decline sexual advances from your spouse when you're not in the mood?
All right. I think, like we've said basically throughout the conversation we've had so far, it is going to be a simple no, I don't want this because of this, and that should be the end of conversation in a normal setting, right? But I think is the job is not on you to convince anybody why you do not want to engage in any sexual relationship with them. It is just the only job on you is to make the choice. The other person is to receive. You have saying that you should convince is already an aberration on the entire concept of consent. It's not your job. You are not a how will I explain it? You are not to convince somebody why you don't want to engage with someone. I don't want something rather. I don't want to do this at this time. If it's like the first part of the question said, you want to remain celibate till marriage, fine, you let them know that okay, I don't want to do this because I want to remain celibate till marriage, and the person is either to fall in line or fall out of line. That's the person's choice. You don't have that responsibility to convince anybody to fit into your sexual choices. It is your sexuality, so you have absolute body autonomy. So I don't think the job is on you. All you have to do is to say yes or no, and the person is to accept. And if it doesn't fit into the person's desires, the person should move ahead or move on, because I don't think it's your responsibility. You just have to say yes or no. There's no polite or impolite way. Just say yes or no.
Thank you very much. For the second part, how can you politely decline sexual advances from your spouse when you're not in the mood? Let me talk a bit about that. So,
Okay.
when we talked about throughout the course of this conversation, we've been emphasizing on the fact that your body is your own, body autonomy. That's the whole idea of sexual consent, that no one is entitled to your body to have sex with you, even if they are your spouse. And it's important that this understanding is like driven into your head, because that's the only way that you can even have the consciousness to decline your partner when you are not in the mood. Because a lot of people go around thinking, oh, it is my responsibility to have sex with my partner. If that's what your politics or your philosophy is, that's fair enough. But your partner is not entitled to your body. So how can you politely do this? It's as simple as I'm not feeling up to it right now, or I am sick, or I'm really not in the mood. And now why I am wary about the point of politely declining is because it's rooted in the idea that if you don't do it politely, or there's a way you can do it that will resort to some kind of harshness from your partner or whatnot. Now, it's important again that as you have this understanding of body autonomy, your partner understands this, has this understanding of body autonomy as well. And so when there's this understanding on both sides, your partner knows that it's not that you are trying to deny them sex. Rather, it's that really you are not in the mood. And so they know that they do not have an entitlement to having sex with you at that point. It's a different thing if your partner knows maybe you are notorious for trying to deny them sex so that you can get things from them. That's an entirely different dynamic. Or so far as it's just simply a thing of, I am not in the mood. You are having regular sex with your partner before. So not being in the mood is not the end of the world. So it's important that before this whole thing even ever comes up, that you and your partner have conversations on sex and they understand that it is not something that they're entitled to. Rather, it is a working relationship between you people that you can decline. All right, moving on to the second question. If I'm in a relationship and my boyfriend forces me to have sex even when I don't want to, and I just let him have his way to save my relationship, is that considered rape or consensual? Ogolua, please.
Well, is question. Sorry, can you take the question again?
Okay, let me take it again. If I'm in a relationship and my boyfriend forces me to have sex even when I don't want to, and I just let him have his way to save my relationship, is that considered rape or consensual?
It's question. That's what it is. There's no consent in that sexual activity. You said yes to doing it, but it was not enthusiastic and it was not voluntary. You were coerced to engage in that sexual activity. So no, it is not
Yeah.
consensual.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because of the choice of word there. The person
Yes.
wrote forces, and
Force.
force can mean a lot of things. Force can be holding you down, actually. Force can be denying you something and putting you at risk. So, because of that term alone, force, it is rape. Um, um, I think Rekia is she has come back, but seems like she's still connecting. So we'll continue with the questions, and as whenever she comes back, we will be able to go back to the section she was supposed to speak on. All right, moving on. Please, like I said before, if there's anyone that wants to say something, if we ask a question and you feel like you have a comment to make, or you want to ask a question yourself, please request, and I will be happy to put you on. All right. The third question. Why is it that men being forceful is considered normal and even attractive to some people? Surprisingly, it's a theme in some published books. Okay, so I will speak on this, and this actually, coincidentally, is related to what Rick is supposed to speak on, which is toxic masculinity. Why is it that men being forceful is considered normal and even attractive to some people? So there is this idea that if a man isn't assertive in quotes. Now, assertive is the wrong term here, but that is how people like to say it. Then he is not in charge. There's this concept that for the sexual relationship to be exciting and work, the man has to be very dominant. Now, this is independent of dominant, submissive dynamics that happen in BDSM or people who are into stuff like that. It's just the general concept that for you to be a man in a sexual relationship, you have to be in control, in charge. Now, people have now taken that in control, in charge, and extended it to mean bish, for lack of a better way to explain it. Just throwing yourself out there, twisting the woman up and down, doing things in such a harsh way. This stems from toxic masculinity, your expression of your masculine self in a way that isn't positive, isn't safe, but rather through ideas of what you think a man should be like, as opposed to a man not being anything except being a man. Not, you don't have to prove anything to prove your masculinity. So that is why people think it's normal and why they think it's attractive to some people. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who are attracted to that sort of thing, people who want their men to be very dominant, and that is very valid. But what this now means is that there are some men that project one sexual partner on another sexual partner. So they've been with maybe a couple of women that are all into being forced and twisted and being having dominant male partners, and then they project that idea on their sexual partner, and that is where consent comes in. Because if you have important conversations on consent and understand what your partner is into and what your partner isn't into, you will know how you should approach them, or if you should even be having sex with them at all. So if it's a problem to you if your partner isn't submissive in a sexual setting, then you should not be having sex with someone who isn't into that. And so that is why some people consider it normal, because they are projecting an idea of what they think or that what women like onto other women. Women are not a dichotomy. Women are not homogeneous either. We are different people, unique in our experiences, unique in our sexuality. And so people take that idea and project that onto different women. And then on their own, just simply being the kind of person that they are because of their toxic ideas of masculinity, they express that in their sexual relationships. But it's not proper to simply present yourself in that way already in the middle of the sexual relationship without having the conversation of what your partner is open to. Honestly, if you're having a sexual relationship with a person for the first time, conversations, it doesn't have to be carrying a checkbook and going, number one, do you want to kiss? Check. Number two, should I take your bra off? Check. That's what, no, you don't have to do that. But if you know that you have tendencies that are not exactly vanilla, as they would say, it's important you have that conversation with your sexual partner and take it from there. All right. The fourth one, when a woman doesn't resist your sexual attempts towards her, doesn't try stopping you, or doesn't say anything, is it smart to continue? Ogolwa, please.
Okay. So the question is asking now that you're in a sexual, maybe you are engaging in a sexual activity and the person has not indicated no. The question I would
Yeah.
ask that if the person said yes, then you can go ahead. And if the person is not showing any form of discomfort, you can go ahead as long as there is a clear verbal consent and then there is no indication of discomfort. I think you can't go ahead, but one thing that you should do is to check in because you're already obviously doubting, right? As
Yeah.
if you're already having doubts about if the person is consenting, I'll actually advise that you should stop and just, gather around again and say, are we okay? Should I continue? Do you want me to continue? Put your doubts on the table so that they are clear. So I would not even say, I take that back, don't continue. Stop in that instant as long as you are having doubts. Even if the person had earlier given a verbal consent and you cannot sense this, even if you feel like you cannot sense discomfort, as long as you are having doubts, please stop and then check in. I feel like that's the best approach in that situation.
Yes, I agree with you. It's always important to err on the side of caution. Always important. It's better you are wrong than you are right in this particular context. So, it's better that you just assume that the person is not okay and you keep checking in. That way, you don't cross any boundary or you go out of the confines of their sexual consent, because um, this comes from the place of non-verbal and verbal consent. And it's a bit contentious for some people. So a lot of people insist that sexual consent must be verbal. Some other people disagree and they believe that there are certain situations where you can successfully negotiate consent non-verbally. But this also requires a lot more experience, carefulness, and perceptiveness. So it's important that you understand where you are in your sexual relationship. If it's somebody you've been having sex with for over a year, okay, then over a year is even a stretch. You've been having sex with this person for months, right? And you both understand each other, then you know that if they are not resisting your sexual attempts because they are into what you are doing. But if this is a new relationship, then it's better you err on the side of that of caution. In general, if you have any doubts, though, if you have any doubts, please always assume that the person is not into it and ask it. So, like we already said before, keep asking. Content is an ongoing process. Do you like this? Do you want to continue doing this? Is this comfortable for you? Am I hurting you? All of these are so important in the process of ongoing consent, and it will make sure that all around you have a safe and healthy sexual relationship. All right. The fifth question: what if the person verbally consents but doesn't really mean it, and instead they consented to just please the other party? So I already spoke about this when I was talking about elaborating on Ogoluwa's talking on coercion. And if you simply consent just to please the other party, there's a basis for it. So are you trying to please the other party because you think you will be hurt, or because there's indirect threats to your person? Or are you trying to please the other party because you want them to like you? These are two different dynamics. So if it's one where you are not in any kind of harm, perceived or real, then if that is the case, it is not rape, it's not sexual assault. But if it's one where you consented because you believe that you were in some kind, you were like you're not consenting will put you in some kind of harm, then it is coercion and that is rape. All right. The sixth one, next question. You know that stuff we read online? This is how the person phrased it. You know that stuff we read online that sometimes if she says stop, she actually wants you to carry on. Is that true? Please, Ogolua.
Sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
Okay, so you know that stuff. This is how the person phrased the question. You know that
Okay.
stuff we read online that sometimes if she says stop, she actually wants you to carry on. Is that true?
No, it's not true at all. She says stop and she means stop. I mean, the basics of education in Nigeria involves English language. So I think we understand when someone says stop, they mean stop. So stop is stop. I feel like that's a simple answer. Stop is stop. That's
Yeah,
it.
yes. To just take that from a different angle, um, yes, what she said is absolutely correct. But there are certain sexual orientations, or not orientations, sexual relationships where people are into certain things that require role play or BDSM. And
Yes, actually, you're right.
the term stop is actually not stop. And so anyone who is into this kind of thing should already know. But just in case you want to be into this kind of thing,
She
it's
do thorough
important that
research.
you have safe words.
Yes.
It's important you have safe words. So because it could be, for example, maybe you are role playing. What do I use now?
A
Okay, so not
police
necessarily
officer.
role. Yes, a police officer. Exactly, exactly.
Yes.
So when you're
Yes.
role playing
Perfect
something like
example.
that, where that involves you saying stop already, it's already part of the role
Yes.
play. It doesn't mean that you actually want them to stop, but it's important that you have safe words. Whether it's safe words, whether sometimes if your mouth is already tied, you may not be able to speak. So safe gestures that ensure that your consent isn't broken and the activity is still kept within the confines of your consent. Okay, I see that we have one request. Um, Okay, I think this is Mary Joan. I will just make her a speaker and we will continue. Just give me a moment. This is slow. All right, Mary Joan. You can speak. We can't hear you though. Hi, we're waiting for you. Can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay. You made a request. Is there something you want to answer? Is there something you want to say?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think that was an error. I was just listening, basically.
Okay, no problem. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Um, okay, sorry. All right. The next question. How does consent apply in relation to making remarks about a person's body or making sexual innuendos? Okay, so to answer this, talking about sexual consent, it's important for us to understand that it is all encompassing when it comes to everything that has to do with sexuality. In fact, consent as a concept covers everything that has to do in life, right? So you imagine that when it comes to sexual consent, it encompasses everything, especially like I emphasized on sending pictures before, that sexual consent applies to that. So don't just send a person a naked picture of a sexual picture of yourself without consent, and don't force a person to send you sexual pictures of themselves, right? So it also applies to making remarks about person's body and sexual innuendos. Now, this is not very, how do I put it? This is not very straightforward. It's not very easy in some sense to understand for a lot of people, because for them they think, okay, are you saying that we cannot make jokes? Are you saying that we cannot talk to our friends, or we don't have freedom of speech and stuff like that? But if you are committed to having healthy sexual interactions with people, even in a sexual relationship and outside of a sexual relationship, because you don't have to be in a sexual relationship with a person for you to make sexual innuendos. I know I make sexual innuendos with my friends, and I'm not in a sexual relationship with them, right? So you mustn't necessarily be in a sexual relationship for that to happen. So how does consent apply in this case? You need to understand the relationship you have with people. Personally, yeah, I ask my friends, I say things like, are you okay with me saying stuff like this? Does this make you uncomfortable? Are you fine with this? Right? When it comes to sexual innuendos, you're talking about something and there's a sexual joke inside of it, and you want to make that joke. You can simply say, are you okay with me making this conversation sexual? It's as simple as that. The problem now is that a lot of people do not know how to have make uncomfortable statements. We don't know how to sit with our discomfort. So my advice would be, if you don't know how to sit with your discomfort, perhaps don't even do it at all. If you think it would be uncomfortable for you to ask for consent to make a sexual comment, then perhaps you should not be making that sexual comment. It's as simple as that to me. So it just means that you are not close enough to that person to be making that comment. But if someone is your friend and you people play, laugh, eat together, hang around each other, go to class together, stuff like that, if you consider this person your friend, then then a foundation is that you should be able to have difficult conversations, right? So it's just one time you have to ask, are you okay with me making this kind of comment? Are you okay with me saying something like this? It's as simple as that. And then when it comes to making comments about the person's body, in general, please never do that. Whether it's sexual or not, a person looks bigger, please don't say that they've put on weight or they've lost weight. I'm sure we've all heard this before, but it really is important. Don't say it, don't talk about it, don't make references to their bodies, especially if you're not friends. Again, you need to understand your relationship. If you are friendly enough, if you are close enough to make a comment about their body, by all means, go ahead. Maybe they look like they are falling sick. You can say that they are losing weight. If they look like they are putting on weight, you are happy for them, they look good. You can say that, right? But if people don't have that kind of relationship and people are just acquaintances, it's important that you just avoid it. What is the worst thing that will happen if you do not make a comment about a person's body? Absolutely nothing. Nothing will happen. The world will not end. So it's important that you simply do not do that, right? But when it comes to a sexual angle to that, um, you can try and, how do I put this? Again, ask, really, are you okay with me saying this? I do not mean to offend. Things like that. It gives them an opening. It gives them the chance to receive the comment you're about to make, as opposed to them just being hit with a comment and then being thrown off balance and being confused as to where this is coming from or why you are saying something like this. Hope that's clear enough. Please, if you guys are with me, please give me some reactions. So I'm not talking into a vacuum. Please indulge me with a heart, something. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ogolua. Thank you, BB. All right. Thank you, guys. So for the next question, um, apart from verbal consent, how else can I get consent and be sure it was given? I've spoken a bit about this, but is there anything you would want to add, Ogolua?
No, not necessarily yet. Other forms of non-verbal consent can, I think, things like maybe you are nodding your head, you are giving thumbs up, you are pulling someone closer, making direct eye contact. But one thing to note here in non-verbal consent, right, is ensuring that when you do not feel clear, when you do not see clarity, like you are doubting, always ask. That's always the clause in non-verbal consent. Someone can consent to an activity by initiating a sexual activity, by you may non-verbal, yeah, maybe actively touching, but you need to be clear. That's the thing. If there is any form of doubt, I feel like that's the, let's say, the golden rule of consent. If there is any doubt, ask. That's
Yeah.
all I just want to add. If there's any doubt, just ask. But yeah, there are non-verbal forms, nodding your head, all those non-verbal forms of communication here. It's also is also applicable here. But if there's any doubt, please ask.
All right.
And
Thank you very
silence
much.
is not consent. That's another thing to
Yes.
say. Yes,
Yes.
it's not a
Silence.
that one is not included at all. Silence is not included at all in non-verbal form of consent. So just to put that out there.
All right. Thank you very much. America, if you can hear me, I just sent you a speaker request so that you can come back on. All right. Just to add to what you just said, the thing with consent is assumption is a killer. Don't assume anything. Especially if, okay, for example, a person initiates sexual activity, a sexual activity, and then you think because they initiated the sexual activity, they are into everything. They may just want to get it up to a certain point and end there. It doesn't mean that they are consenting to continue up to a certain level, right? So that they initiated a sexual activity doesn't mean you should go ahead and start touching everywhere and doing everything. That's not like they simply want to just kiss you and end it at that, right? So it's important that we don't just go around assuming what people are thinking in their heads. It's so important that to just clear your doubts, ask. And it doesn't have to be stringent questions. You can make it in such a way that it's not awkward for the both of you that are involved. Um, okay, so we have Rekia back, thankfully. So Rekia, you were supposed to talk about toxic masculinity and vulnerability in relation to consent. I don't know if you can hear me and you can just continue from there before we go back to the questions. Mm. Okay, so we'll continue with the questions. If a person keeps saying no to sex with their spouse, what happens to the marriage? For example, if you are asexual. Ogolwa, could you throw into this?
Okay. So I think we've already, first and foremost, as we always clear the air before moving on. You don't owe anybody sex, even in marriage. So it's to put it out there. So even though you keep denying, you're not denying, you're just making the choice to not engage. There are two clear things. Sex is not something you give. You don't give sex, you don't receive sex. You engage in sex. A man or a woman does not give sex or receive sex. They are both participants of the sexual activity. However, in this situation here, I think it's advisable, especially if it's a married relationship or whatever, you can go for sexual therapy and figure out what's going on. I mean, is an option to understand the dynamics, to understand what's going on between them both parties. But it's not a question of, oh, if I don't give in quotes to this sexual activity, my marriage will be destroyed. You Marriage cannot be held by coercive sexual acts. Any marriage that is already held together by the very weak thread of coercion is definitely bound to not stand. So it's just, I feel like it's best that you are not to hold your marriage together with sex. I think the concept of marriage is way deeper than that. I don't know, people that are married will have maybe more to say about that, but I think concept of marriage or any form of long-term relationship is held by a stronger cord. So I think you both can figure it out, and you can seek a professional if you feel like it's not. It's That's the thing I don't like about this country. There's this shame around seeking help, sexual help, like from a sexual therapist, and we have people that like that are actually that have thorough education on this matter. So I think you can seek professional help. And as regards asexuality, it's just also very, our country is not a, in fact, some people don't even recognize that that exists. You tell someone that, oh, if you tell someone you're asexual, they'll be like, oh, don't worry, see, just one night with me, you have a change of mind, like they have a magic penis or a magic vagina or vulva that will suddenly change your asexuality. So I think people need to understand it's not your job to give anybody sex. It's not your job to receive. It's not your let's say your what's this word? You are not receiving sex as a gift. If someone says no, they mean no, and you can just move on from it. And if you are with someone who cannot understand the dynamics, I think you just need to talk about the, will I say, the possibility of furthering the relationship. So I don't know. That's my take on that. I feel like if it's you don't owe sex in any form of relationship, long term, short term, and if there is a problem, you can seek professional help.
All right, thank you very much. Completely agree with you. And to add to that, understanding your sexuality is so important in your sexual relationships. So if you are asexual, for example, and you know that you are asexual, then you have no business being with someone that is not asexual, right? You can't enter a marriage with an asexual as an asexual person with someone who isn't and expect that they would be okay with not having sex simply because you are not like you are not okay with it, right? You people have to have the conversation. Let it not be that you go into the marriage on false pretenses. Because at the end of, even though you are asexual, it doesn't mean that they have a right to your body. However, they have a right to get a divorce and then be with someone who is more compatible with them. And not just asexuality, your sexual drive, your sex drive in general. If you are very hypersexual and you know this, well, this may be a constraint for people who are religious and are able to have sexual relationships before they get married. But in general, if you know you are hypersexual and you are able to find out that the person you are partnering with isn't, and you don't think it's something you can keep up with, then don't get involved. Don't get involved with them. Don't be in a sexual relationship with them. Don't be in a don't date them. Don't marry them. Right? Unless you're okay with dealing with it, because it will now be a problem if you try and force them to keep up with your sexual orientation. Likewise, if your libido isn't as high and you know that, and you know that your partner's libido is high, it's important that you have a conversation and let them know that this is it for me. Oh, I will not consent to having sex with you so much, right? And I hope you are okay with that. If they are not okay with that, then it is left for you people to decide where to go on with your relationship. But having that understanding in mind is very important. So people are not working on false pretenses, right? Um, the next question. Okay, before we go into the next question, something else I would like to add to talk about is stealthing. Could you talk a bit about stealthing in terms of consent, Ogolua? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, it seems she can't. Okay, so when it comes to
Hello,
sexual
sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry,
Do
sorry
I?
about
Did you hear
that.
me?
Okay, you're talking about stealthing, yeah?
Yes, yes, I was.
Okay, all right. So basically, I think Rika spoke about, or someone spoke about it earlier. Basically, stealthing is when you remove your condom during a sexual activity without the knowledge of the person you are having sex with. Like you both agreed that okay, we are going to use a condom, and then you decide that okay, oh, out of your will I say great knowledge, you want to remove it without telling the person, is a crime actually. And one of the things that does is that there is no, like we said, that has destroyed the path of informed consent. You need to let the party be aware. But I have to be aware. The person has to be aware of everything that is being done and how it's being done. I agree to protected sexual intercourse. Why is there no condom at the end of the sex? So it's important that we understand that it is a crime. If you are going to use a condom, use a condom. It's even advisable to use a condom for so many reasons. So yes, that's basically stealthing. I don't know if you have
Okay.
anything to add.
Yeah, that's basically it. For a lot of people, condoms mean different things when it comes to sex. For some people, it means reduced pleasure. For some people, they are into ejaculating as like into their partner as a sexually stimulating activity, right? And then some people are into like impregnating the risk of impregnating a woman as a sexually stimulating activity. It is very
Yes,
weird,
the
but I
risk
promise you it exists.
is a turn
Yes.
on for them.
Yes. So people do these things for different reasons, right? And that is why a person may not want to have sex with a condom. Well, that's valid, right? But once you have consented to having sex with a condom, a person that has these very, in quotes, weird concepts of condoms when it comes to sexual relationships, um, may want to go against your consent and remove it without your consent. You see, I already said remove it without your consent. It already means that your consent has been taken away, right? So that is a form of sexual assault because just like the story I was telling about Bridgerton, you're you have consented to something to a certain point. It doesn't mean you've consented to it outside of a certain point, right? Okay, so the next question. Sorry, give me a moment. Okay. If they are both drunk and consent isn't explicitly given, is that rape? Um, Ogolua, do you want to go?
All right, this is a very let's say a very dicey
Con-
area.
yeah,
But very controversial, and there are so many opinions. But I think this is where we can draw the balance. Now, anybody that is drunk cannot give consent. Like,
yeah,
how do I explain it? Being under the influence of anything, right, that affects your judgments, is the person cannot give, I don't want to say the word full consent, because consent is an entire thing, but the person is not in their right frame of mind to give consent at that moment, right? So it's usually advisable. There are other school of thoughts here that have they have, let's say, an hierarchy as regards giving consent when drunk. Some people will say that, okay, some people may not be absolutely drunk to lose their ability to make that decision. But in order to avoid trouble, in order to be sure, like in order to, there's definitely going to be doubt in that kind of situation. It's best that in that moment, right, let's wait till he or she is sober enough to make that decision, right? But if they are extremely, there's an hierarchy. I don't even think we want to even go into it. But now in a situation where we have two people who are drunk, right, and in this situation, some people say they are both on level ground, so whatever happens between them is consensual. I would not exactly agree, because there's a general concept that whoever initiates that sexual activity will take the responsibility of the outcome of the activity. Like if you are both drunk and then you are the one who is initiating it, the man or the woman, you are responsible for it. You are still going to be responsible for your action. So that's the concept there. I feel like that's, I don't know, a way to draw a balance to basically say anyone that initiates and the other person is not consent. It's obvious. Any form of discomfort, if you are not sure, withdraw, retreat. That's like we said, the golden rule of consent. With any form of doubts, retreat. So even if you are drunk, you are sober, you are whatever mental state you are in, if you have any doubts, please retreat and ask or wait till later or something. I don't know. I feel like it's just advisable. If there's any form of discomfort and you're uncertain, please just retreat. That's my take on that. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. So like you already said, this is a controversial, very controversial aspect of sexual consent, because being under the influence has different levels, and so there are different school of thought. So people would say that so you can have someone who is under the influence but is very coherent, right? So if the person, as long as the person is coherent and is aware of what is happening to them, they're able to give sexual consent. They're able to give consent, right? So two people in this state of mind are able to consent to what is going on. One person being under the influence though, and the other person being completely sober, it's advisable to not just even do it at all. Like, are you trying to have sex with someone who cannot respond, right? But if it's two people who are under the influence, the question of whether they can give consent or not is dicey because they are both in the same state of mind. However, what really matters is if the other, like, when it really matters is when it now comes to the point of determining if there has been sexual assault, and that's where it can be dicey. So now come and start defining the person's state of mind, how intoxicated they were, can be complicated. But like Ogolua said, to make sure everyone is on the safe side, right? As long as you people are not coherent, you or the other person, just try and avoid sexual interactions to be on the safe side. Because it is going to be very difficult if the person wakes up the next day and has no memory of the sexual interaction and then feels like a violation has occurred. All right. The next question, how do you prove sexual assault? This can be very complicated. When you talk about rape, sexual assault, unless there's an audience, unless there's someone there, it's very difficult to prove, right? How do I put this? There are certain crimes that the evidence, you can create a trail for them. For robbery, you can clearly show that there's something that has been taken. You can see sign of forced entry, all of that. For murder, a person is dead, so obviously a crime has been committed. But when it comes to sexual assault, even though rape kits exist, now for those who do not know, a rape kit is a medical examination that is carried out when a person says that they have been sexually assaulted to collect evidence from them, right? So even though rape kits exist, there is still always the question of talking about of consensual sex. That is implying that the sex that you had was consensual. And then when it comes to outside of penetrative sex, how do you also prove that sexual assault has occurred? Unfortunately, there are no cameras that are going around following us. And unfortunately, again, being in the country that we are from, in the world in general, proving sexual assault is difficult, but more so in our country where so many there are so many restrictions to us having healthy sexual relationships. The laws that should exist to protect us are not there at all. So proving sexual assault can be difficult because who are you proving it to? You're trying to prove it to the authorities. When the authorities don't even understand, don't even believe or take it seriously that something has happened, it can put you in a very precarious position. However, for you to prove that something has happened, it's important for you to define it in terms of the consent that was given and the consent that was broken, right? So whether consent was given, whether consent was denied, that is how you can prove that something was done. For example, if you're working somewhere and someone touches you, you're going about your business, you're just minding your own business, doing your own job in your office as a normal person, and a person touches you inappropriately. That is sexual assault because the person didn't even ask, not to now talk of you giving consent, right? And then when it now comes to um, penetrative sex, a person forcefully penetrating you, or in the case of a woman, forcefully um, kissing a man, or if the man is incapacitated, forcefully penetrating herself with the man, that is sexual assault. So for you to prove it, for you to show it, is for you to define what has happened to you in terms of the consent that has been broken. Now, if you have any kind of evidence that you can prove, that you can show, rape kits being one, if it was that it wasn't even, you were not even consenting to sex at all, the evidence of semen in your person or vaginal fluid on the man's person can be evidence that something has happened. Then, depending on how violent the activity was, again, it could be anal sex, oral sex, whatnot. That's another way to prove it with evidence that is on your person and how the evidence is usually collected through a rape kit. So on your body, on your clothes, stuff like that. And then if you told someone about what happened to you, if in the moment when you felt violated, immediately called someone or you cried to someone, something like that, that's another way to prove it. So it's like something happened and you told someone. Now, it doesn't mean that that if you don't tell someone, it makes your sexual assault less valid, or if you take time to come out and talk about it, it makes it less valid either. The fact is, so far as it has happened, it is valid no matter when you talk about it. Would it make proving it difficult? Yes. Proving it when it happened that day, few minutes before, is already difficult as it is, not to talk of after some time. But it's important that we all feel happy knowing that when your consent has been broken, assault has occurred, and that is valid in and of itself. Proving it is difficult, but these are the ways that you can go about it, given the resources and the laws that are obtainable. All right. So we have one more question before we start to round things up. Why do people think that men enjoy being raped? Ogolua.
Yes.
Why do people think that men enjoy being raped?
Men, oh yes, I
And
think this is wrapped around toxic masculinity. Is the idea that, okay, men are the sexual creatures and women are not. It's a concept that men are the receivers of sex and women are the givers of sex. So when a man comes out to say he has been raped, it is the idea is very jarring to the population, because they find that how can you, a man who is supposed to be a receiver of sex, be feeling, and why will you say you did not want it? And that is a lie. I do not believe, I don't think here we believe in any of that, because men and women are equal sexual creatures and sexual beings, and they both have the right to agree or not agree to sexual activity. And this is mostly demonstrated among young boy, like when we have statutory rape or any sexual activity with someone below 18, right? It happens a lot when young boys they are sexually assaulted, and for the ones that actually do speak up, right, they don't listen to them. They shut them down and say things like, you are a man, you should take it in, you should enjoy it, which is a lie. I mean, consensual sex is the best form, like is the I'm not even is the only right form of sex. So
The only
saying that
form,
someone
really.
should, the only form, actually the only form of sex. So any other form of sex is not right,
It's rape.
is criminal, is criminal, is criminal. So clear cut. So there is nothing like they will enjoy. There is no enjoyment in forcing. I mean, even in situations where we are not forced, things that are not, how will I explain it? It is clear cut. There is nobody enjoys being raped. Even if a man has an erection or has an ejaculation, that is a physiological response. It does not interpret to enjoyment. The person's body is just reacting to the stimulation that whoever the abuser is doing. Yes, abuser, because that's just best, because that's another concept. Then but the person had an erection, the person had an ejection, the person was hard. No, all of that doesn't matter. The person did not consent to enjoying, the man did not consent to the sexual activity, and it is rape. You are raping that person, and you are either raping if there's penetration or any other form of sexual activity. That is sexual assault. Men do not enjoy being raped. That's wrong. This is not
Yeah.
correct in any way. So
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you very much. All right. So we've basically run through the questions that we could take from the ones that we've been sent. And then just to speak about the section that Raquel was supposed to talk on, we've talked about toxic masculinity, and just to throw a bit of light on vulnerability when it comes to sexual consent. The truth is that sexual relationships require a certain level of vulnerability, right? It means that you are giving a person access to yourself. And so the concept of vulnerability when it comes to sexual consent is that you sometimes can feel like perhaps you are giving up a part of yourself when it comes to sex, or it's sort of an invasion of yourself. Now, it's important that your state of mind when it comes to sexual relationships is intact. If you are not, for lack of a better term, mature enough to understand yourself, understand what you like, what you want, how you like it, how you want it, what you do not like, what you do not want, what you do not want to see, and being assertive enough to for your yes to mean yes and for your no to mean no, and to be able to say it, it puts you in a difficult position. And so it's important that you try and approach your sexual relationships from that angle. Work on yourself as a person first before you try to start having sexual relationships. It will help your ability to give and receive sexual consent so much. And then from another angle, when you are vulnerable to a person, it can mean that the person can take advantage of you, right? And when it comes to sexual consent, this now means that a person can take advantage of the consent that you have given them to do things that you do not want, or to do things at all, right? So that's an angle of sexual consent. And then what do we say the problem? How do we address this? It's saying that as individuals, our moral compass needs to be skewed in such a way that we understand that when you are doing something to a person, If a person has given you access to themselves, that you do not disrespect the access that they have given you. If you know a person is being vulnerable around, it's vulnerable around you, it doesn't mean that you should now take advantage of the vulnerability that is like it's accessible to you. If a person is vulnerable to the point where they are not coherent, or where they are the information what they are doing is not informed, then it's important that you do not seek consent from them, because chances are that you will receive consent from them because they are vulnerable. And so it's the onus now lies on you as who a person who has a good moral compass to not seek consent, and also not to give consent when the person seeks it, because that the person is vulnerable doesn't mean they don't want to have sex, right? So not just you not seeking, but when they seek it, don't assume that they want it. It can come from a place that is not um quite informed. And vulnerability can mean a lot of things. It can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be physical. All right. So any form of vulnerability that a person has, do not take advantage of it for your own sexual gratification. This has been so great, people, and I am so happy that you've stayed with us this long. Um, it is really important that you understand consent. That's the long and short of what we've been saying, because it's an ongoing process that takes work. And so if you don't understand it, you will not be able to do the ongoing work and put yourself into it. It can be very uncomfortable. Sex in itself can be uncomfortable and awkward. The conversations around it itself, it can be awkward, right? Not to now talk of having to verbally ask for it. But you need to learn to sit with your discomfort. And something I like to tell people is that if you are not confident, or if you're not confident, old enough, mature enough to have the difficult conversations that involve sex, then maybe you should not be having sex.